Jedi Fallen Order. I think we can all agree that this game was 10 times better than absolutely anyone thought it was going to be. In a world where we see Star Wars games cancelled in what seems to be every 5 seconds, this one managed to survive the infamous EA Star Wars cancelling hammer. And in doing so, it ended up being released to mass amounts of universal praise and very minimal amounts of negative reception. But it is a Star Wars game, it doesn't matter how good it ended up being, people were always going to complain, it's Star Wars. So in this video, we're going to break down and dissect just what made Jedi Fallen Order so great, and how it became yet another EA Star Wars game that the vast majority of people were scoffing at to one of the best Star Wars games of all time. Jedi Fallen Order basically hits the ground running with its story. 5 years after the Jedi Purge, we come across Cal Kestis, a former Jedi Padawan who is in hiding working as a scrapper on the planet Bracca, doing absolutely everything he can to stay out of sight of Imperial Inquisitors hunting down what is left of the Jedi. But Cal uses the Force to save his friend Prof, to which an Imperial probe droid spots this and alerts the Empire, and then Cal eventually escapes and meets up with former Jedi Master Sia Junda and scrapper pilot Grease Dridus, and then the story kicks off. Fallen Order really does hook you from the start. It tugs on your heartstrings from what we've already seen in Revenge of the Sith, and for me, someone who actually adores that movie, it felt like this game was primed for someone like me. So naturally, this game blew me away from a story standpoint in the first 20 minutes. But the thing that made this game so amazing from a story standpoint is it felt like it never really had a down period. You always felt like you were progressing through the story and coming across some familiar faces and some new ones that were also really interesting. And as you progress through the story, you get set on the path of a former Jedi Master, Eno Cordova, to access a vault which contains a Jedi holocron containing a list of Force-sensitive children, of which can be used to help rebuild the Jedi Order. So this alone has you really interested to where the story will go, and I think one of the things that makes it so interesting is you know that it inevitably will not work because the game takes place only 5 years after Revenge of the Sith, and things don't really kick off for the Jedi again until Luke Skywalker shows up. So it obviously isn't going to work in some way, but we still want to know. We assume that Cal is just going to end up dead at the end of the game, so we play through this story with a sense of impending doom. The writers for this story really did use limitations of the time period that Fallen Order takes place in to its advantage, and it's one of the reasons that this game works so well. Fallen Order's story doesn't play it safe and super predictable like Battlefront 2's campaign does, and it feels like it really adds something to Star Wars, whether it's seeing more of Vader, seeing more of how surviving Jedi were hiding throughout the galaxy, seeing more of the early days of the Rebellion, or seeing how the galaxy was evolving under the Empire's rule. It all amounts to a story that really does hold its own place and contribution to the Star Wars timeline. It's not exactly unknown that EA for a long time decided that fans do not want single-player games, despite the fact that the vast majority really do want single-player games. They just basically wanted to make multiplayer Star Wars games with a tasty little microtransaction infusion to maximize dollary-doos. And because of this, that's why we saw the predatory release of Battlefront 2 and the pay-to-win system, which received backlash, that has now changed how the gaming industry looks at microtransactions. So Jedi Fallen Order's marketing was pretty terrible in all honesty. When we got the first announcement of the game at E3 2018, it was literally a guy in a chair saying, "Yeah, new single-player Star Wars game's coming." It was the most boring and uninspired game reveal I have ever seen, and given what was to follow with the game's marketing, it just added fuel to the fire of EA wanting to seemingly just get this game out without drawing too much attention. Which is one of the main reasons so many people thought that this game was going to just be terrible. But when the game arrived, it was, as we all know, the complete opposite. The first gameplay reveal we got for Fallen Order was kind of average. A lot of people in fact really did not like what they saw. And in the lead up to the game's release, the game got moderate advertising. Like, I have friends who don't really play Star Wars games who didn't even know that this game was coming out. But when Battlefront 2 was being marketed, they knew and saw everything. It just went to show that it looked like EA were really trying to send this game out to just die so they could just go back to their money-making ways with multiplayer Star Wars games. And just continuing on cancelling other single-player Star Wars projects that people are looking forward to. But lo and behold, Jedi Fallen Order made them a ton of money, with Fallen Order becoming the fastest selling Star Wars game ever released on digital platforms, despite EA seemingly sending the game out to die. EA said that players did not want single-player games, yet the game they tried to sweep under the rug, a single-player game, broke all kinds of sales records despite terrible marketing. So obviously, EA have now been forced to swallow their own words because Respawn done a great job on Fallen Order. And because it gained so much money and a lot of universal praise, we are now getting a sequel. Fallen Order was the opportunity for Star Wars gamers to stick one up to EA, and boy did we rally and make them swallow their own words. It's crazy how well things can go for Star Wars games when the games that players actually want are the ones that get made. Not just the games that EA think that players want. Now, switching focus back to the game itself, Fallen Order introduces us to a ton of new characters to Star Wars, most of which are actually better characters than ones we have seen on the big screen. Fallen Order proves once again that some of the best Star Wars characters come from the video games. Cal Kestis, he's a pretty solid protagonist. I wouldn't say he's the standout of the new characters, but he certainly is a character that you can get behind and has a really solid backstory. We constantly go back and explore that backstory, and it links up to the gameplay very well and your progress. Taron Malicos was also a really interesting and unexpected character that we come across, a former Jedi general during the Clone Wars who survived the Jedi Purge and wound up on Dathomir, where he turned to the dark side and took over the Night Brothers, to which he attempts to turn Cal Kestis as well. There's also Merrin, who is a Dathomirian Night Sister who was manipulated by Malicos, but once she learns the truth, she joins Cal and the rest of the crew. But I think the two standout characters of Jedi Fallen Order are Sia Junda and Trilla Suduri, or the Second Sister. Two fantastic characters that are a big surprise packet in this game. Sia was a former Jedi Knight and Trilla was her apprentice, but they were captured during the Jedi Purge and subjected to torture, and Trilla turned to the dark side and became the Second Sister, to which Sia escaped and cut herself off from the Force. Now, a lot of the time when I play games, I'm half tempted to skip cutscenes, but Jedi Fallen Order was up there with Red Dead Redemption 2 when it came to engaging cutscenes because the characters were so damn good, and you just wanted to hear their story. Now, I know that I'm picking on Battlefront 2's campaign a little bit here, but despite Battlefront 2's campaign having well-presented cutscenes, I could not really be bothered watching them because the characters were dull and their actions were predictable. Iden, don't care. Del, don't care. Hask, don't care. But with Fallen Order, every character is interesting. There's no wasted potential here, and things aren't so predictable. Like, I thought Cal Kestis was a goner from the start. I thought Sia would be a one-note side character. I thought the Second Sister would be a budget masked villain there instead of Vader. But no, these characters progress, and you get hit with curveball after curveball. Trilla at the end of the game broke through the ranks as one of the better Star Wars characters in my opinion, and I would love to see more regarding her character, given her last second change of heart and redemption, I guess you could say. I've got to say, I was really blown away with the characters of Jedi Fallen Order. There is no weak link, which I thought was very impressive, and it's a major contributing factor as to why Jedi Fallen Order is so great. I think it's fair to say that Jedi Fallen Order played on nostalgia throughout its story. The entire Order 66 sequence was something that really hit the nostalgic beats of Revenge of the Sith. But it also gave us a brand new viewpoint of what it was like for all kinds of Jedi when the Order was given by Palpatine, showing us the minutes prior to the Jedi Purge as well as what followed. It's something that I was not expecting to see, and when it happened I actually lost my mind. It's definitely one moment that sticks out for me with this game. Respawn nailed it there. Now, we also have a ton of nods at the Clone Wars throughout the game's run, whether it's clone trooper helmets, separatist droid parts, or even the opening sequence of the game on Bracca, where you see Republic and separatist ships getting scrapped. It all does play on the nostalgia of the prequels and the Clone Wars TV show really well. That scene where Cal wipes away the dust on that old Jedi starfighter sets the tone perfectly in the opening moments of the game. And it's all of these callbacks to the Clone Wars that make this game play that nostalgia card to perfection. Now, I can see those original trilogy only fans not caring for a lot of what this game has to offer. But seeing as the masses are starting to love the prequels, especially Revenge of the Sith, which this game calls back to constantly, I can see why so many fans appreciate these little callbacks and slices of nostalgia. You don't get hit with nostalgia and fan service just for the sake of it. It all serves its purpose with the story being told, and that's why I think it played a big part in making this game as good as it is. Fallen Order builds on the lore, and it does that with well-placed callbacks and moments of just pure nostalgia. Respawn really knew what they were doing here, and they knocked it out of the park. Now, we can't talk about Jedi Fallen Order and why it's so great without talking about the gameplay. I think Fallen Order gives us the best showcase of lightsaber combat of any Star Wars game to date, and to be fair, it is the newest, so realistically it probably should have the best lightsaber combat. But it's so much more in depth than I think most of us were expecting. It was only in 2017 where we were cutting up bugs with Luke Skywalker in Battlefront 2's campaign with janky lightsaber mechanics, so in that short amount of time we've come a long way. We can freeze lightsaber bolts and send them back at enemies, we can pull them towards us and impale them with lightsabers, we can lift them up and throw them around like the Force Unleashed days, and that's just the Force abilities. You can also combine awesome combo moves with the lightsaber and enter some really well done finishing animations, going with the single or double hilted lightsaber or a bit of both. There is just so much depth to the gameplay. The boss fights in this game were at times some of the most difficult I have played in a long time, depending on the right difficulty, with new moves being thrown at you as you progress through the fight, and even if you fight the same person twice, they bring new moves every time. And even taking out basic infantry can be as entertaining as a boss fight sometimes. You can mess around and change your approach to a group of enemies so often to the point where every fight you encounter feels fresh. But my biggest problem with Fallen Order is its lack of replayability, but even with that in consideration once you finish the game, it's still relatively fun to just go back through the planets and just go nuts with all your force powers on enemies, as the gameplay is so fun and in depth. I think that Respawn just done a great job throwing together gameplay elements from games like Dark Souls and Sekiro. It really does complement the Star Wars formula well and is another contributing factor as to why Jedi Fallen Order is so great. So in summary, I think that Jedi Fallen Order is easily one of the greatest Star Wars games ever made, going right up alongside Knights of the Old Republic and the original Battlefront 2. And it's personally my favourite Star Wars game ever made, but I felt like I was the exact kind of player that they were catering to, so I probably hold a little bit of bias there. But when you combine everything we spoke about in this video, the engaging story that keeps you intrigued and doesn't lose you in its complexity, the fact that this is the game that players have actually been wanting for so long, the fact that we got a bunch of new Star Wars characters that held strong on their own without needing prior characters to elevate them, the nostalgic beats that just really hit home if you're a lover of the Clone Wars era and Revenge of the Sith, and the in-depth gameplay that borrows some of the better elements from a ton of critically acclaimed games. All of this comes together to create one of the greatest Star Wars games of all time, and one that is more than likely going to pave the way for the future of single-player Star Wars games.